Hello, folks, and welcome to this recording today, which will feature the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Rishi Sunak. Um, Basically, what I want to point out uh, in this conversation is his current hyped up immigration policy, which is targeting at locking out people from poorer countries of the world to travel into the United Kingdom or Britain, and obviously as a way of maintaining himself as office in his office as Prime Minister um, through such a right wing policy of discontinuing so-called friendly uh, immigration policies, always blaming the Labour Party of a few years ago that they increased immigration more than the Tories have ever done. Um, Immigration has a very, very personal attribute to it because every story is unique. And if you look at the story of Rishi Sunak, it is one that will compel you to think that this man is on a revenge mission because of what happened, the personal story of what happened to his parents, especially his father, when uh, his father decided to leave Kenya in the 1960s. So, Richie Sunak's father was born in Kenya. His grandfather came from India in 1935. At that time, Britain was colonizing India at the same time Kenya or East African countries like Kenya and Uganda, later on Tanzania. Basically, the British colonial enterprise wanted more skilled or unskilled labor from other colonies to come to East Africa, and basically, most of these were coming from India. And so Rishi Sunak's granddad arrived in Nairobi in the 1930s and ended up working as a civil servant at the Arambe House, currently called Arambe House, which was uh, the governor's office in the colonial times. He was a civil servant later on in the treasury. So Rishi Sunak's Punjabi father was already a middle class um, Indian living in Kenya, and the Indian community were given preferential treatment by the colonial enterprise during the colonial days in Kenya and the rest of Africa. As you know, that the colonial system was one where racially motivated hierarchy was quite present. So the Africans, black Africans, were the last on the queue in every way you can think of that. So Sunak's father was obviously coming from a well-to-do, not wealthy background, but well-to-do in terms of living in Kenya. His mother was born in Tanzania, which is next door to Kenya. Now, what happened just immediately after the colonial period? Kenya's first national leader, Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta, uh, decided to institute a policy of you either a citizen or you're not. So the Indians who were in Kenya at that time, in the early 60s, were the leftover of a British colonial system of those who had been uh, compelled to travel out of India and go to the colonies, but without real citizenship because India itself had locked them out. India had stopped anything to do with dual citizenship, and these guys were already in places like Kenya, and the UK was having its own policies of, uh, not really wanting the Indian people from the colonies to come to the UK. That if they were born in Kenya, for example, or the whichever generation, that's fine. They could not then become a dual. Okay, that's natural to sneeze. Um, that doesn't mean that I was misplacing the facts there. All I'm trying to say is the notion that that Britain would now want an Indian of certain generations from Kenya to join the national profile of Britain as a passport holder and so on. That was something that the British government was struggling with. There was that kind of psyche of we don't want them, but we'll put a law to entertain just a few every year, but not many. So at that time of post-colonial time, there was about 150 to 155,000 maybe Indian people in Kenya. But the new Kenyan government had, you had ministers like Mwai Kibaki, Tom Mboya, and Jomo Kenyatta himself. In fact, even when he became president, they decided to enforce this new rule where they want to do what they call Kenyanization of the economy. So black elites were taking over the business community, the retail sector, and so on, the hospitality sector, land reforms. But basically, the idea was to introduce black Africans to especially government or state positions as well. So this had an impact on the Indian community at that time, and they were more or less treated as second class citizens until, let's say, 2017, when the Indian community in Kenya, all South Asians, were regarded as constitutionally in 2017 as the 43rd or 44th tribe of Kenya. But going backwards again, the story about the Rishi Sunak's father not being able to claim dual Kenyan and British citizenship, and being locked out of Indian citizenship altogether, meaning that these people were nationless, left a bitter mark on people like Rishi Sunak's father. And he ended up in England, went through college and all that, and he's now a practicing GP. He's been for many years. He's a doctor. His son is prime minister now, who is facing a lot of pressure from conservative party members, which is saying the ones who've the mindset of not wanting migration to increase, but then they know the effects of the so-called British Empire and how that marries in with the issue of migration. So, without mincing any words, is Rishi Sunak revenging for what happened to his father or the Indian community who were forced to relocate from East Africa before they could decide on whether to retain the Kenyan citizenship or then jump ship? Because actually, many Indians decided to stay. With this new rule, they decided to stay. They left the retail sector. Some of them, most of them, became industrial business entrepreneurs, and others took a low profile, but many stayed. And in fact, Kenya has a huge South Asian community, and I've not even mentioned the Pakistani Kenyans, or if we have a big profile of Bangladeshi Kenyans and so on. But they've taken their faces are in the political landscape in Kenya. Often people think that next door from Kenya, in Uganda, Idi Amin giving South Asians or Indians between 24 and 48 hours to leave the country in his Africanization program of Uganda back in the 1970s, Idi Amin, the former president of Uganda, people think that that was the beginning of the constitutional or forced exit of the minority Asian communities in East Africa. But actually, it happened in Kenya through, a quick change of the constitution, and even just a speech that was made by politicians here, here and there before that became law. In fact, in that political contest between the two leading parties at the time, before and just after independence, KANU and KADU. KADU was in the opposition. They're the ones who opted for dual citizenship, but KANU, the ruling party, said no. They preferred a new system where Africans or Africanization of the economy was paramount, which means dislodging others from other parts of the world, especially the Indians who wanted to take dual citizenship in case something happened or anything uncertain about their future. But of course, the British government changed the law a little bit, tweaked it, so they started accepting X number of Indian arrivals, and that started from the 1960s all the way to the 1970s, when across the fence in Uganda, Idi Amin had also started his own program, which was a copycat of Kenya, but in a more aggressive way. And also in Uganda, over 30,000 Asians opted to stay as citizens, and eventually most of them left as well. What I'm trying to project in this conversation is that Rishi Sunak may be on a revenge mission, and that's why he's now stopping migration from African countries. Thank you.